On today's episode, the Tampa Bay Lightning have a lot of questions going into the offseason. We try to answer those questions. Is Stamkos coming back? What does it mean for Hedman if he does? As well as who's out this summer. All that coming up and more on Locked On Lightning.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. I'm your host, Adam Danker. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Locked On Lightning. And just a reminder, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. On this episode, we're asking the tough questions. We're addressing the tough topics. The Stamkos talk heats up. Where does Victor Hedman fall and who's out this summer? We'll be talking about all of that. And just a reminder, please go ahead. We are available wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form, namely on Amazon Music, Spotify, and iTunes. Also, subscribe to our channel over on YouTube. Drop a comment below. Who do you want to stay and who do you want to go? We're going to be talking about a whole lot of that this week as well as the weeks to come because with one of the things that happens every year, and we who have been listening and watching the Lightning and following the Lightning for many years know that, every year all the pieces are moving and whether, sometimes you want guys who you don't necessarily like to go. And then sometimes, like we've seen in recent years with some players on this Lightning team, guys that you want to stay. And unfortunately, they have to go to clear space. But the one player that I think everybody is in agreement who wants to stay, and that is Lightning captain Steven Stamkos. And I'll start off with saying that I firmly believe that Stamkos made his case, if he didn't already before this season, that he deserved to stay in Tampa Bay for the long term. But my thing that I will say to a lot of Lightning fans, that I think there is a general consensus about this as well, is we need to understand that for as well as Stamkos has played, especially over the last couple of years, remember, he's 2 years removed from his first 100-point season ever, and he's going into his 34-year-old year, is that we need to understand that this guy, as well as he is playing, as well as he has played this year, and as well as he played throughout the playoffs, time is creeping up on him. And the Lightning have been lucky with, at least since winning the Cup in 2020, that really the injury bug hasn't really snuck up back on Stamkos. He's had his moments, obviously, where he's been dinged up here, hurt here. But for the most part, we've been pretty lucky with Steven Stamkos since then. Really, he's really taken very good care of himself. For the most part, his numbers are right where you would expect him to be. 80-plus points over the last two seasons. This year, he had 40-goal year. Obviously, the plus-minus is not where you want it to be. But what I am trying to say here is that we all want him back, 100%. But I think where the disconnect lies between some fans and others when we have this conversation is that we need to understand, we're not paying for 40-goal scorer Steven Stamkos. We're not paying for 100-point Steven Stamkos. We're paying for, okay, maybe one more year of that. And then down the line, really what your money is going to get you is a guy that may continue to be over or at times look over the peak of his career. Because let's make no mistake about it. And listen, I'm not trying to downplay his stats. And listen, he really was a huge part of this team this year. Obviously, Kucherov was the driving force on this team. But really, when it comes down to it, he got off to not a very good start He kind of got it together in the later months of the season and put up a lot of points and goals, especially in March. But really what I'm trying to say is that I feel like there's two kind of sides to this that I've seen on social media. There's one side of the Lightning fan base basically saying we need to get rid of X, Y, and Z and free up all this space and give him all the money. And that's not at all what is realistic, first of all. Second of all, I think that's the whole reason as to why it is taking so long for the two sides to reach an agreement, because I kind of feel like that was probably the starting point, that Stamkos or the Lightning gave him a number. He said that is grossly under what I imagine or view myself to be, as usually as negotiations go in any sport with any athlete. And then as the season went on, you kind of saw that the Lightning were probably right about that. This is all hypothetical. I mean, it could have gone the other way. I mean, you know, it could have been some other issue, whether it been of length or whatever the case may be. But we need to understand that as well as he played this year on paper, as well as he played in the playoffs, we can't lose sight of the fact that this guy is getting older, that maybe he has 2 or 3 years ahead of him, if not less than that, before we really start to see Father Time take his toll on Stamkos. Because at the end of the day, listen, he's overcome a lot in his career, and this guy, I'm sure, on top of conditioning, on top of in-season workouts, he does a lot of really housekeeping. And what I mean by that is really a lot of in-season work to either stay off those injuries, keep those injuries at bay, or you know, just not have a recurrence of said injuries that he has had. And as with age, anybody who's over the age of 30 knows you don't really recover as fast as you would like to be recovering on a daily basis. And the wear and tear of the NHL season really is going to be a tough thing for him as his career goes on, unless he starts to sacrifice more scoring and dedicates more of his time to that physical side, you know. And if that's the case, even so, where does that leave him? Does that lower him down to the third line? Does he go back to the second line as a second line guy? Really, that's the question. You know, the Lightning shouldn't be paying a guy who's really going to maybe have first line power play time, play full time on the second line. Maybe if things get even worse, play on the third line minutes. You don't want to pay a guy like that a salary where on paper he looks like he's your number one scorer. And that's really, I think, what is the disconnect between these two sides. Is Stamkos' side feels like, as they should, Stamkos' side feels like that he is still has a lot more years in him to produce like that. The Lightning, other than the fact that they want to continue to free up more cap space to continue to improve their team, they want to. They are fully aware that the clock is ticking. And I don't remember the whole thing off the top of my head, but Stamkos did come out and talk and say how really that has been the theme of this team over the years, is that everyone has understood that, you know, they could easily get, whether they've been Stamkos or Hedman, especially those two guys. Both those guys have understood throughout the entire process and entire time that they've been here that for as well as they've played and all the numbers and accolades that they have collected over the years, really the end goal with everybody is the Stanley Cup. And so really what it comes down to, do you want to get paid or do you want to win? And obviously that shows the culture of this team and this franchise, that all sides are kind of leaning towards you want to win. So I think in the end, you know, I'm not going to sit here and really throw out a number, but I would imagine that it would be somewhere maybe in the 5.5 per year AAV for maybe 5 more years or something like that, something of that nature. Obviously, or maybe even if it's a little lower, we might see it chock full of incentives and stuff like that. But that's only if they release that information. If it's a lower number, I think we could all agree or assume that that's something that is probably in the fine print of the contract. So let me know. I mean, what is the cutoff number for you guys? Because like I said, and I think is the general consensus among Lightning fans, you don't want to spend too much money because we could very well see a slow start like we did last year. This year, like a Stamkos who really just was, he didn't look like he was evolving with the times and didn't understand that this is what needed to be done, not just sit in his office all day. There's a time and place for that. We saw it in the playoffs, and we saw it in the latter stages of the year. He kind of woke up to that fact and realized that he needed to change things up himself. So where does your cutoff? How many years? What is the AAV? Where do you think these two sides meet in the middle? Let me know in the comments below on our YouTube channel. And coming up, regardless of whatever the number and length of the contract these two sides may agree to, that is definitely going to have a ripple effect for Victor Hedman as he is going into the last year of his deal. So what does that mean for him? We'll talk about that coming up in just a little bit. But first, we're going to talk about two of our friends, one of which is our friends over at eBay Motors. Now, passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance: superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home the huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. And moving on to our next sponsor, that is our friends over at the Game Time app. Now, if you haven't heard about Game Time, this is one of my favorite apps to use when I'm going to sporting events, and not even sporting events, also just events in general. Game Time is now also my favorite. Game Time is also now an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which means and makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the tip-off. One of my favorite options and really features on this, I mean, they all are great, but really the one that really I love is all-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. I want to know what I'm paying, how much I'm paying, and it now, not when I'm about to put in my credit card information or when I'm about to press apply, because you don't want to have that hesitation and then boom, your tickets have already been swept up underneath your feet, and now you got to look for maybe higher tickets or tickets that are maybe not where you want it to sit. But even if you don't find where you necessarily want to sit, the best part also is seat views. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL. $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So as always, I'm going to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel there. Hit us up in the comments section. If you want to reach out to me or the show, go ahead, follow us on Twitter or Instagram. Our channels, our accounts are LO_Lightning on Twitter, as well as LockedOn_Lightning on Instagram. If you want to reach out to me, go ahead, Danky Dank, DENKY, D8NK. Love hearing from all of you. So we just got done talking about Stamkos, and we're not even anywhere near done talking about Stamkos for the week, and really until the day comes that we are firmly in the know about where he lies. Because we've already spoken, and it's already been spoken about on other outlets as well, that really, as much as Julian Brees-Boss, as much as Stamkos himself would say it, even as much as John Cooper would say it, they have all agreed that this is his home, this is where he belongs, and a deal needs to get done. Nothing in life is a guaranteed. But I will say, I don't think a lot of people understand the domino effect that could come from Stamkos re-signing in Tampa. Because now that you got really your big fish out of the way, your prized stallion, now you have a whole nother Pandora's box that you need to go through and open and figure out. And that is Victor Hedman. What do you do with him? This year is going to be, this upcoming season, 2024-25, is his last season of his contract before he becomes a UFA. And he's going to be turning 34, I believe, in December. So we have some time. But I think we could all agree with Hedman, even though he's 33, a 33-year-old defenseman is more like a 38-year-old forward. That may not make sense to some. Some of you may agree, but that's really what I'm saying, is that the way we have seen Hedman play this year as well as last year, really he doesn't move as well as what we really would have liked to have seen him move over the last couple of years. Unfortunately, it really is. It's really unfortunate to say this, but when it comes down to it, the situation might be a little bit more difficult for trying to find an agreement for Hedman than it is for Stamkos, because with Stamkos, at least, you'll get that scoring to a certain degree. With Hedman, you really aren't going to get that mobility, the mobility that you really saw from him at the prime of his career, when we were talking, when you were looking at him in 21, 22, all the way back to, his years in 15, 16, even going back to when he finished ninth in the Norris back in 13 and 14. That's the issue. You don't get that defensive side of things from him anymore. I said it at some point. I said it really a couple of times this year, where really, we can live without the scoring. A couple of years ago, he scored 20 goals, had 85 points, played a full 82-game season. It was phenomenal. It was great. I mean, really, it was by far the best year that I think he's had. I thought his defense was very good. I believe that was when Cal McCarr won. And that's just the way the league has shifted in the Norris now. Now it just goes to the highest scoring defenseman. But really, the Lightning don't need him to be that 20-goal guy, even though he did get 13 goals and 76 points this year, which is great, which was really a quiet offensive year for him. The reason for that was really because his defense sucked. And I hate to put it so plainly, but that is 100% true. He really left a lot to be desired this year on the defensive side of things. And that a lot of that could be, some of that could actually be put the blame on just the Lightning in general. Julian Brees-Boss not being able to really surround him with a solid defensive partner. Playing with Nick Pervix. Pervix has been really atrocious this year. We'll talk about him in the third segment, because he is definitely on my list of really people that need to leave Tampa as soon as possible. But with Hedman, it's one of those things where, like I said, he's got a lot of miles on him. Like I said, he's a 33-year-old defenseman going on 34. In hockey years, that's a 38-year-old forward. Like I said, if that doesn't make sense, oh well. But the issue now lies is what's his special number, because let's say what I said before, I would project maybe 5.5 for Stamkos. Where does that leave Hedman? Especially if Stamkos gets about, let's say, 5 years. Now for Hedman, would he be able to sit there and look at Stamkos and be able to take less than him? Or is he at that point in his career saying, I have sacrificed millions of dollars. I have taken a pay cut in order for this team to win. Hell, I helped this team win 2 cups, one of which I was the Conn Smythe Trophy winner for. I deserve to make the big bucks. I deserve what I'm making now. And very well, we have seen that in the late stages of players' careers where, they still feel like they have a lot more in the tank, and they still have a lot to prove. And, maybe Hedman says, well, guess what? I'm turning 34. I still deserve to make $7.8 million a year. And I think we could all agree that that is very much not the case. And really a number for Stamkos, a number for Hedman, well, to put it simple, whatever Stamkos gets, Hedman is not getting. That's just what it comes down to. Now, do you, as Julien Brees boss, do you negotiate that way with Stamkos with that in mind, saying, all right, we think that Hedman is more so worth now $5 million. So do we overpay Stamkos so we could get to that point to give Hedman money? That money? So we have a full basis, a reasoning to give him that money? Now, obviously, none of this is really on logic. I'm just spitballing here, people, because it's interesting. And I think it's a very interesting way to go about things. And I wouldn't rule it out if that's how the Lightning are really going about it. And that's why the Stamkos talks have kind of stalled. Because they want to give him more money, but not more years. That could also be it. And that could also be the same case for Hedman. If I had to bet right now in the show, out of the both deals that could potentially get done between Stamkos and Hedman, who's more likely to get done and who's more likely to walk away? I would probably say Stamkos is more likely to stay in Tampa Bay than Hedman. The Lightning are in desperate need of defensemen, and Hedman walking away and them having that money to free up to go get maybe a top-tier free agent for a defenseman, that would almost kind of do them a favor. So let me know in the comments below. I know this is going to be a very controversial topic, but really it's something that, really needs to be discussed, because it is going to be a reality sooner rather than later for the Tampa Bay Lightning. If they don't reach an extension this summer with Hedman, 100% I guarantee you we're going to have the same kind of news cycle we did with Stamkos, except it's talking about Victor Hedman. So coming up in just a little bit, we're going to talk about who's out this summer and why. We'll talk about that coming up in just a little bit. Before we're going to wrap things up with our sponsors, with our friends over at Monopoly Go. Now, listen, we got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go, because I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You've already talked about that, but there is just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you could team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. There's more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vault. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own mini games like digging for treasure or robotic pachinko machine. There's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. So one last time, I want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead, download this episode if you're listening to us. We are available on Amazon Music, Spotify, iTunes, and you could go ahead and subscribe to our channel on YouTube. So this summer is going to be a very action-packed summer. If you haven't figured that out already, it's going to be a very busy summer for the Tampa Bay Lightning. You got Stamkos. Possibly we might get to a Hedman deal, or at least the conversation will be had at some point. It's already being had here because we like to get ahead of the bullet here on Locked On Lightning. But clearly this first round exit from the Lightning has really, if they weren't open already, has really opened the eyes of a lot of Lightning fans as to really how depleted this team is and how much they have fallen since their Stanley Cup winning days. I mean, that's just what happens, unfortunately, when you're a top team every single year. Your draft stock goes down, you trade away draft picks at the deadline to get new pieces. Can't afford guys because they're playing good. That's just the way it works. But this summer, there's going to be, I think, a very big turnover for the Tampa Bay Lightning, especially on the defensive side of things. I really think that when we look at this defensive, these blue liners, these pairs, whatever we want to call them, there's a lot of holes. There's a lot of things that really need to change because right now, as I've stated, as you've probably seen on Twitter, me conversing with others who are in the know with Lightning news and rosters and all that stuff, we all agree that this team is built for the regular season. They're built to make the playoffs, but they're not built to win in the playoffs. That much is very much clear. So when I look at this defensive core, these pairings, the players that really just kind of make me shake my head and say, this player needs to go. We already talked about one of them, Erik Cernak. Erik Cernak, which is crazy because he's 26 years old. He's making he's making $5.2 million EAV, and really his main focus on, or his only job really on this team was to play defense, to be a lockdown guy, to be the apparent or the torch catcher to the successor. There's a word. The successor to Ryan McDonagh. And really that has not panned out. I mean, if anything this year, he has proven that he is not up for the task. And really, you know, I don't know how many more years or seasons we could really go over this, because another guy, you know, this proves my point. When I was talking about Victor Hedman, he looks a lot older than what he really is out there. Same goes for Erik Cernak. Erik Cernak sometimes looks like he's moving in slow motion. The guy has zero touch on the puck. He offers virtually nothing on the offensive side of things. So really, when he's not playing good defense, what is really his redeeming quality out there? Other than the fact that, you know, his teammates love him. But other than that, I mean, being a good teammate isn't going to win you games. I'm sorry. I know a lot of people may not like that statement, but it's 100% true. And the same goes for Nick Pervix. We all know John Cooper's been a huge fan of him. But unfortunately, the Nick Pervix experiment is over and done with. He was an offensive anomaly last year. And when I say that, he scored 9 goals, and then pretty much that was it. And then this year has been very disappointing. You really expect a guy like that after a year he had, because he did play very good defense. You expected a guy like that to come out and play well and build upon that season. And that really hasn't been the case for Nick Pervix. Oftentimes I have said on this podcast how really if you don't hear a defenseman's name, it's usually a good thing. But when you don't even notice a defenseman out there who's not making plays and really not doing much of anything, who numerous times throughout this playoff series with Florida and even building up to that, is getting beaten for loose pucks along the boards. That's a big issue. That's a big issue. So unfortunately, Pervix has to go. And the same goes for Matt Dumba. It was a good experiment. At first it was really good. I liked his grittiness, but in the playoffs he really disappeared. And just with Chernak, he's just an offensive liability. He has zero touch with the puck. He's really not going to give you anything offensively. And that's really where it lies the issue for the Tampa Bay Lightning, is that they need to get quicker. They need to get more offensively savvy on the defensive side of things with their blue liners, as well as bringing guys who can play defense and make plays, because that's really what you need. So really, other than that, Sergachev, obviously he's staying. He's a guy that we look towards the future as being one of the top guys on this team as a leader, kind of being the successor to Victor Hedman in terms of that category defensively. Hayden Fleury, I really liked him this year. He didn't play a ton of games, but I thought he had a good bounce back year considering just how disappointing he was last year and not effective he was. Obviously, I look at Hayden Fleury as a third liner. That's really what I look at him as. Anything above that is a stretch, and you're opening up yourself to disappointments. Darren Radish, I think he's done enough to prove that he is a consistent first liner. If not, I would be completely open to have him on the second line with Mikhail Sergachev. That is a good combination that I really like. But Radish has a big shot. That's the thing that I really like seeing from Darren Radish this year. He has a big shot. And I think he registered one of like the fastest slap shots or shots this year in the entire league. And that shows you, they kind of need to unleash him a little bit, figure out ways to allow him to get better offensively and to get more looks. And, a guy unleashing a shot like that from the blue line, especially through traffic, he's going to get his points. He's going to get his goals. And that's what the Lightning really need to do. They need to get back to that. They need to find ways in games to get guys going that are on the defensive side of things. And that all starts with really getting guys in here who are savvy and could play a 200-foot game. And we don't see that. We see guys that really are mostly unable to move out there, who have zero agility, who have their lateral movement is non-existent, and are gripping the stick so tight, it almost looks like they're going to break it every time they get the puck. And then on the offensive side of things, on the forward side of things, other than the obvious and Connor Sheary, who has been massively disappointing this year, obviously Luke Glendening, I love him. I think he should stay. But that fourth line needs a facelift. There needs to be some sort of change on that fourth line, because really, Tyler Mott has been a disappointment. Maybe it's just a matter of moving things around. I really like what we saw out of Mitchell Chafee. He played well enough to play on the third line. As for what happens with Stamkos and Duclair in the offseason, I don't know. I mean, Tanner Jeannot, there's been a lot of talk on the internet, and, quite frankly, I don't hate it. There's been some talk with Tanner Jeannot being put on the first line with Cooch and Point, and them needing to have some kind of grinder, some guy who does have skill, who does have finesse, but really is out there to be a body. And I think that's not a bad idea to try out. But then you're leaving yourself open on the fourth line. Really, who is going to be that guy that is going to be able to really complement Luke Glendening? It's not Tyler Mott. I can tell you that. Tyler Mott, unfortunately, really had high expectations for him coming into this year. Really thought he was going to be really a steal at the fourth liner position, especially with what we saw him do up in Canada as well as with the Rangers. But really, all that offensive production that I expected was really non-existent. And maybe that's also a matter of just playing on the fourth line instead of not playing with Paul or Esamont. So, I'm not as quick to say that we need to get rid of some guys on the forward lines, except for Connor Sheary. Calvin DeHaan on the defensive side, one last thing. I think, maybe it's time to just move on from him. I was talking earlier today with somebody saying that I really liked Emil Lilleberg. I think he has shown enough that he could be a consistent third-line pairing. Maybe that's something we could think of, pairing him up with Hayden Fleury so he has that veteran presence with him. Maxwell Crozier, I think, needs one more year before we kind of feel better about seeing him consistently given big assignments. But other than that, really in the offseason, the Lightning are looking for 2 defensemen. And then I think you could kind of wait till the deadline, if you're in it and you feel good about yourself, to go out and get a forward to help you out with some scoring. So let me know in the comments below. It's going to be an interesting offseason, and we are going to be constantly talking about it here on Locked On Lightning because, there are so many moving pieces. There's so many things to look out for, whether it be with contracts, whether it be with roster personnel, all of that. We also got the draft coming up in a couple of weeks, or really in a week, May 7th. So lots on our table here at Locked On Lightning. So make sure to subscribe, follow the podcast, download, go ahead, and because you definitely don't want to miss it on the action. So that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I'll talk to you in the next one.